In this example, I want to look at an existing EC2 instance and the fact that I have a public IP address that's assigned from AWS, and that public IP address also has a public DNS that is set up by AWS. These addresses remain static as long as I keep my instance running, but since I'm running an on-demand instance, one of the main benefits of that is that I'm able to take the instance state from running to stopped, so that I would then stop the cost associated with running the instance. Right? So right now I'm paying hourly, and if I decide, I'm going home for the night or I want to stop working on it right now, I can go ahead and stop the instance. And what that would do is it would tell AWS, like, hey, the instance isn't running. You can reallocate those computing resources to someone else and stop billing me. The problem with that is when I do stop the instance, that public IP address doesn't necessarily get released, but it has the impact of basically telling AWS that that IP address is not in use, and we haven't paid for a static IP address. So what AWS typically will do is it'll reclaim that public IP address and reassign you a new one when you restart the instance. Okay, and that's typically not a big deal, except if I am running a website and I have a DNS entry that points at that AWS assigned IP address and it changes, that is a big deal. The IP address really can't change. Okay, so I have two options. I could purchase a reserved instance, which would be a little bit cheaper and I'd save costs, and then it would basically be running 24/7. I could let my on-demand instance run 24/7 and the IP address wouldn't change. Or I do have one other option, which is to use an elastic IP address. And the elastic IP address is basically me purchasing a static IP address from Amazon saying, hey, I want to own this IP address. They charge me 50 cents per month for that. And then once I've purchased that static IP address, I can assign it to my EC2 instance, and it'll maintain with that EC2 instance throughout the lifetime of my elastic IP address. Okay, so that it would then allow me to then take this on-demand instance and change the instance state to stop. So I'm not getting charged for my EC2 instance, I'm only getting charged the 50 cents per month for my elastic IP. Okay, so I just want to show you how to set that up and configure it, and then ultimately how to release it back into its pool. So if I scroll down on the left-hand side, there's this Elastic IPs. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Elastic IPs. I'm going to allocate an Elastic IP. So I'm going to get it from Amazon's pool of IP4 addresses. I'm going to allocate it. Okay, so I have an allocated IP4 address. I can take that IP address and then associate it with an EC2 instance. So I can associate that elastic IP with an EC2 instance that's running. Okay. So now this elastic IP address, this 18.190.62.19, is going to be associated with my instance that I have running. Okay, and that will maintain even through me taking that instance state from started to stopped. Okay, even through termination, I'll have the elastic IP address, and I'm getting billed 50 cents per month for that elastic IP address. Okay, so that gives me a static IP address for my EC2 instance. Okay, if I decide I don't want to do that, so let's say this was just a temporary thing, maybe I ran it for a few months, I paid, the 50 cents per month for a few months, and I decide, okay, this server is ready to be decommissioned and I'm kind of done with it. Even if I take the instance and terminate it, so if I take the instance and I stop it and then terminate it, so stop it, that stops the billing, but it still exists, right? So the instance state is stopping now, and eventually it'll go to stopped. Once it goes to stopped, I can say, well, I'm really done with it. I don't even need to maintain it at all. I could take the instance state and actually terminate it, okay, once it's stopped. Okay, so if I refresh this one more time, it's still stopping. I should be able to eventually terminate the instance. Okay, so it's initiated the termination. Even if I initiate the termination, it's not actually going to get rid of my elastic IP address. Okay, so my elastic IP address still exists out here. Typically what I'm going to do with the elastic IP address then is I'm going to disassociate it. Okay, so now it's no longer associated with any EC2 instance. And then once I've disassociated it, what I can do is I can release that. And by releasing it, I'm basically telling Amazon that I no longer want to be billed for that elastic IP address. Okay, so that's how I can get a static IP address for an EC2 instance, even though my EC2 instance is an on-demand instance and it's not running 24/7, and I'm changing the instance state from stopped to started, and I'm pausing billing essentially, but I still am able to maintain a static IP address.